Got it. So, welcome back, Bogdan. Welcome back, viewers. We're here for the fourth in our series of interviews with Dr. Bogdan Kotnis. I'm Bob Terzian, your moderator. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to finish today with our analysis of the last interview that Mr. Putin gave. So, Bogdan, the interviewer justified his uh, interview on the grounds that Americans had a right to hear directly from Mr. Putin what the reasons were in order they could make up their minds. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, hi, Bob. First of all, hello to everyone, and thank you for your attention. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all your comments and suggestions. They motivate us. They motivate me tremendously. Now, as far as the Putin's interview is concerned, we have to look at it not so much about the content, but about how it was organized. So. We celebrate free speech and press, and anyone who wants to speak has a right to do so. But when free speech is claimed on behalf of a man who suppresses freedom of press and speech, a dictator known to kill journalists and murder his political opponents, I have my serious doubts whether it is free speech we're actually talking about. And on top of that, Putin already has his own unfree press. He even has the RT, the Russia television station in the United States. So there is no shortage of news coverage quoting Putin and his senior advisors arguing why they are invading Ukraine, have been invading for over 10 years. So for me, this interview was an occasion to repeat and reinforce Putin's message, which is full of lies and manipulations, rather than giving us some new take.
Well, why do you question that it's free speech?
I believe that we should protect ourselves from invasive, manipulative speech disguised as an innocent exchange of ideas. And think about this. Did we offer Hitler an interview or grant him free access to our media when he invaded Poland? Did we invite the Japanese Emperor Hirohito to address America on the reasons for the bombing of Pearl Harbor? And with the Ukrainian invasion, Putin brought an end to the unprecedented 80 years of relative global peace and respect for sovereign boundaries universally adopted after World War II. I believe that enabling Putin to address us in his own words without questioning him about his war crimes and challenging him for murdering opposition leaders and journalists is nothing more than legitimizing Putin as a respectable face and voice to America. I think it's a travesty.
I guess you could say you're more interested in talking about the interviewer than you are about Putin's words. Is that accurate?
Precisely, Bob. I believe that the interviewer enabled Putin to present his lies and threats with the intention to introduce Putin's divisive propaganda into the heart of America. The interviewer used his social media following to conduct an interview intended to humanize and civilize Putin in our eyes and to distract Americans from seeing Putin for who he really is. And he's the enemy of world order, a violator of a treaty with Ukraine he signed himself, a murderer of reporters and political opponents, and a man accused of war crimes who actually is afraid to leave his own country for fear of arrest by the International Criminal Court.
So, are you suggesting that the interview was a sham, that the interviewer was conducting a sham interview?
Putin demonstrated that the interview was a sham when he reacted to the interviewer's meek suggestion that Putin moved beyond the historical lecture that he was giving to us. And then what did Putin do? Putin responded to saying, "Would you please allow me to finish my historical summary?" And then he just added, "I will allow myself the time I need." And interestingly, this "I will allow myself time" comment was stricken from the written transcripts, which were controlled by the interviewer. Although Putin's words were clearly audible on the YouTube video shortly after it was initially posted. What is that? Isn't that like a manipulation?
Yeah.
And then with the comments to the interview had paid homage to the clean and homeless-free streets of Moscow.
Yeah.
He expressed amazement at the beauty and affordability of the supermarket he was allowed to see. He presented Putin the way Putin wanted to be seen, as a civilized, Western-attired, healthy, with no trace of Parkinson's, intelligent, reasonable, soft-spoken leader who empathized with his citizens and coped with the heavy burden of difficult decision he had to make on behalf of all of us.
Yeah, he did. It is what he was allowed to see. If they controlled the interviewer, you can imagine that he was controlling where he went. So don't you think Americans are capable of seeing through Putin's speech for what it is, or what do you think?
Well, it's just the effect of just dropping water on your forehead drop by drop. So it is not like this one interview is going to make or break everything, but it is. It is an attempt to manipulate and divert us, and I'm not that sure that we all see through it. We're just. I think that many are trying to understand Putin's point of view and his convoluted rhetoric, believing that there is some truth to what he's been saying. And most lack sufficient knowledge of Eastern European and Russian history to evaluate Putin's rationale.
Sure.
And many simply want to believe him for their own political reasons. So I think that there is a lot of those of us who fail to recognize that Putin used this interview as a hybrid warfare bomb, as means of a continuing Russian attack on our national unity and sense of purpose.
So, do you have any evidence of American lack of capability to see through Putin's speech and discover the hidden danger?
You know, it's always difficult to expect that everyone understands everything. So look at the resistance we Americans had to accepting the conclusions of our own bipartisan congressional investigation revealing Russian meddling in the 2016 election cycle and the Mueller report. Both were confirmed unequivocally. They confirmed Russian attempts to influence our election. And, you know, just a little time passes and we have doubts. Did they really meddle? Maybe they didn't. So, you know, if you repeat a lie 100 times, it becomes truth. So I think that's kind of the attempt and the key purpose of that interview in my mind.
So do you think that Americans are immune? Do they feel immune? I mean, you know, we're here, they're there. We've never been invaded. Does that promote a kind of disbelief or insensitivity or lack of awareness? I mean, what do you think's going on there?
You know, I'm just going to tell the viewers that we've been discussing so many different themes, names, subjects offline. So I'm just going to mention Yuri Bezmenov. We're going to one day probably focus a little bit more about him. The danger of propaganda is that it could be very insidious. So I think that most of us believe that we have common sense, so we can detect any manipulation or diversion. It's not so difficult. Well, actually, it is more difficult than people think it is. And I believe that that's what in the strength of a Polish perspective in that case, because the Polish perspective is firmly grounded in the history of Russian hybrid attacks and kinetic wars, it's a useful lens through which to look at Putin and the interview. So with suspicion and doubt. One time we won, one time they won, but it's incessant push that they demonstrate, incessant push west, and we're the first country underway. So the Polish perspective is like the canary in the coal mine. It is highly sensitive, able to read through the fog of manipulations and have truths. So through this perspective, I bring a warning to Americans of imminent danger from a Russian threat, which Americans often dismiss with confidence that they would know better if it was really dangerous.
So, given our commitment to free speech and to the ability to talk like this interviewer did, how do we defend against those who lob hybrid warfare or missiles or bombs into our midst?
Well, it's difficult. I think it just the best protections from propaganda and deception are a well-informed public and press, and most of all the ability to think and reason rather than be swayed by emotions, hate speeches, and the belief in the Führer, in the leader who's going to show us the way. We have our own mind, our own intelligence, and we should be skeptical and pay attention. One good rule is to maintain a healthy skepticism of one who tells you something about which you know precious little.
Right.
Be curious then and ask yourself, or the messenger if you can, questions to assess how much you can trust the message.
Yeah.
Read or listen to other statements he or she has made. Are they objective, truth-seeking, or reinforcing one-sided point of view? I think it's a good gauge. And then the second rule is to distrust the dictators and megalomaniacs, or those who help broadcast their messages. Distrust anyone who has total control or acts like he or she is the only one who can solve all our problems. Dictators and megalomaniacs are firmly and unequivocally rooted in their own reality and have no room for anybody else's point of view. It's dangerous, and if you see that, run from them.
Well, it sounds like a good couple of rules. Well, here you had a broadcaster who has quite a following. I mean, some people have confidence in this broadcaster. And what rules how do you protect yourself when you actually do have some confidence?
Oh, you put me in a very difficult position of some Chinese sage, but we've heard it many times in the United States: trust, but verify. And why not use this advice here as well? So the question is an interviewer known to be objective, or to approach everything with a particular point of view in mind? We should be especially skeptical about persons who are professional broadcasters or who call themselves objective journalists when, in truth, they are propagandists, advocates for a particular persuasion. I don't think they're going to bring us any truth. They just want to reinforce the message they've been, trying to present for quite a while. So the interviewer bringing us the Putin interview has a reputation as a political commentator of a particular persuasion and a following, which is attempting to persuade Americans to abandon global security, which invites Russians to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that you doubt the interviewer's credibility in this particular case.
Yes, Bob. Yes, I do. But aside from the interviewer's objectivity, did he alert the public concerning his own point of view prior to the interview?
Yeah.
Did he fact-check Putin's historical analysis or challenge Putin's credibility on any issues? No, he just told us that the streets of Moscow are great, and because of that, we should believe everything Putin says or implies. And we know that he utterly failed to ask Putin about his war crimes, the death of opposition journalists and politicians, or about the death of his opponents outside Russian territory.
Yes. Yeah.
We must suspect that this interviewer pretended to act as an objective journalist and that he was knowingly facilitating Putin's disinformation and propaganda. He gave a megaphone to a known dictator who has attempted to meddle in American presidential elections. This interviewer sought to interview Putin to advance Putin's own interests and his own interests and political convictions, but not to look for balance or truth. I believe Putin selected this interviewing knowingly because he realized that the interviewer would support him and allow him to present Putin's own worldview.
Very interesting. And as we wind up this interview, could you summarize, what your message is? Let us know where we go from here.
I'm just going to repeat that, this is kind of like the reaction you asked me to have to the interview, but I'm just going to repeat, wake up, America.
Yeah.
We're in imminent danger. This interview is a part of a long-standing, subtle, but very effective attack from Russia that aims on subverting our confidence in our own institutions, our fellow Americans, ourselves, and our sense of national purpose. So right now, we would sacrifice our national security because we have a certain faction of the society we don't like or we hate. So we're dividing ourselves before the battle. It brings doubt to those around the world also who look at us for leadership in defending democracy and world peace.
Yes.
So from a Polish perspective, we need strong NATO and a congressional vote for Ukrainian aid.
Those are excellent points. So is there anything you'd like to add before we end this interview?
It's easier for us to ask questions of the interviewer than Putin. So we should be asking the interviewer for how the interview came to be and follow the money trail, much like the Spanish investigators did in the case of the Catalan secession threat. Remember, we covered it a little bit in our previous interviews. So who did the interviewer want to serve by conducting this interview? What rules of engagement were established? Did he consult with others who knew Putin? Did he try to travel outside Moscow? Or was he just driven around by his Russian friends? And does he always conduct interviews without also consulting with others who might have a different perspective on the interviewee? Examining the interviewer would be more noteworthy than quarreling over Putin's ridiculous and self-serving views of history. So summing it up, this interview for me is a distraction from the imminent danger that Putin's invasion of Ukraine poses for the United States and the free world.
Well, thank you, Bogdan. I can see our time is up, and I want to thank you again for your illuminating comments. I'd like to thank you, viewers, for tuning in again. I hope you'll come back. And as Bogdan said at the beginning, please do comment on the interviews that you've seen and reviewed. Let us know what you're thinking, ask questions, and thanks again. Thank you, Bogdan, and good evening.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone. And I hope we're going to see each other again. Goodbye.